Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Paul Perry, the museum's education director, and welcome to today's program. Today marks the 80th anniversary of the attack on Pearl Harbor, not just a seminal event in terms of naval history, but also U.S. history as well. Today, Pearl Harbor survivors, veterans, and visitors from all over the world come together to honor and remember the 2,403 souls lost during the attack on December 7th, 1941. Among the officers, sailors, and civilians lost were members of the United States Navy Band Unit 22, the subject of today's talk. Less talked about, but nonetheless heroic. These were active duty Navy musicians assigned to the USS Arizona, who, like so many others on that day, suffered casualties while routinely going about their business of the day, unaware of the tragedy about to occur. In their honor, and for all those lost and their families, let us take a short moment of silence in remembrance of their service, and to their families, may their memory be a blessing. I'd now like to introduce today's speakers. Musician first class, Kevin C. McDonald, PhD, Catholic University, MM, Manhattan School of Music, BM, Eastman, serves as archivist for the Navy Music Program and as drummer for the U.S. Navy Band Commodores, the Navy's premier jazz ensemble. He holds a PhD in musicology from the Catholic University of America. His dissertation, Hearing the American Civil Rights Movement in the Music of Max Roach, was published in 2021, congratulations, under the direction of Professor Andrew H. Weaver. Dr. McDonald has presented at academic conferences for the American Musicological Society and the Jazz Education Network. He has shared the concert stage with Dave Liedman, Mark Turner, Paquito de Rivera, Miguel Zenon, Bob Mintzer, Randy Brecker, and the late Lee Konitz. As a jazz fan myself, I know several of those names. Kevin is co-presenting today with Wesley Schwenk, the museum's registrar. Wes received his BA in history from the Pennsylvania State University and his MA in history with a concentration in public history from LaSalle University. He has worked with multiple local historical societies, the Independence Seaport Museum, the National Park Service at Valley Forge National Historical Park, the National Archives, and the Naval History and Heritage Command. He joined the staff of the museum in the spring of 2019. Please welcome Kevin McDonald, United States Navy Band.
Welcome. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. That's Chief Retired Paul Perry, who is the Director of Education here at the National Museum of the United States Navy. Again, welcome. My name is Musician First Class Kevin McDonald. I'm honored and humbled to be presenting today on this particular topic on the 7th of December, on which every year we remember the fallen during the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. Again, thank you to Chief Perry, and brief plug for the museum. I don't know if you're unaware, there are some very, very exciting things going on here at the National Museum of the U.S. Navy. We are right here on the Washington Navy Yard, and there are some renderings of building projects coming up, and it's really, really exciting stuff over at the Navy Band. We share the same base, so as Chief Perry mentioned, I'm very honored to be serving as the drummer for for the U.S. Navy Band Commodores, and we're proudly celebrating our 52nd year as the Navy's premier jazz ensemble. The Commodores are a specialty group of the United States Navy Band, the world's finest, and we are based right here at the historic Washington Navy Yard, just across the yard. And we at the band, we're very thrilled to hear that there's the potential for an auditorium in the new building and perhaps even an outdoor amphitheater. Just very exciting stuff. So if you want more information, please check out everything going on here at the National Museum of the U.S. Navy. It's really, really cool stuff. And we'll continue with why we're all here today. So as President Franklin Delano Roosevelt so accurately proclaimed, December 7th, 1941 is a date that has lived in infamy to the present day. Each year we respectfully give pause to remember shipmates fallen at Pearl Harbor for their bravery, sacrifice, and commitment to both ship and crew. Yet amidst the somber tone of remembrance, the stories of individual sailors and those of Pearl Harbor warfighting units can and should serve as inspiration, both for our Navy's present and future. One such story is that of U.S. Navy Unit Band 22, which was stationed aboard the USS Arizona beginning in June of 1941. A comprehensive understanding of Navy Unit Band 22, however, necessitates a broader contextualization of Lieutenant Charles Benter and his unit band program at the U.S. Naval School of Music. Now, before June of 1935, the fleet's musical support existed as a hodgepodge of sorts, solely dependent on the tastes of each installation's commanding officer. If a CO enjoyed or saw the benefit of musical support, then that command tended to have a larger allotment of Navy musicians. Yet this hodgepodge a la carte model for music in the Navy meant that the skill sets of the fleet's musical assets often lacked standardization, in some cases lacked professionalism, and could stand a polish generally. Additionally, there was little regard for instrumentation, orchestration, or standardized professional ability. Musicians, in essence, were hired as needed or as available. So, tasked with the mission of providing the fleet with more professional, more polished, and more standardized musical assets, Lieutenant Charles Benter founded the U.S. Naval School of Music in 1935. In its earliest iterations, the School of Music, which was then based in Washington, D.C. as an extension of our own U.S. Navy Band, the school, in its earliest iteration, the School of Music was based right here in Washington, D.C. as an extension of the United States Navy Band, again, which is the larger organization of which the Commodores is one part. The School of Music has been an independent command since 1942 and is currently based out of Little Creek, Virginia. Moreover, the standardization and professionalism instilled by Lieutenant Benter's founding of the School of Music remains a hallmark of the entire Navy music program to the present day. The keystone of Lieutenant Benter's training process at the School of Music was the concept of the unit band. After having passed initial proficiency examinations, individual musicians arriving at the School of Music were placed into one of several 21-member unit bands, much like training divisions at Recruit Training Command today. This slide shows a sample proficiency examination report for new accessions to the Naval School of Music. Musicians' names are shown in the far left column, exam grades for primary instrument, secondary instrument, if any, solfege, oral skills, harmony, music history, and a cumulative exam score are shown in the other columns of this spreadsheet. Each unit band was led by one band master, whose ratings ranged from musician first class to first musician and bandmaster. Bands progressed through training as a unit rather than as individuals. Moreover, these standard band sizes allowed for fleet standardization of instrumentation, orchestration, professionalism, and mission operations. For example, a 21-member band with 10 sousaphones would sound quite different than a 21-member unit with 10 drummers. I'm exaggerating, but you generally get the point that it's standardized the way our instrument breakdowns that to a large extent we carry into the present day. Lastly, the team and unit mentality of these unit bands seamlessly integrated into the team-oriented mentality aboard ships on which these unit bands would eventually be stationed. Because each shipboard unit takes pride both in its own operations and those of its ship as a whole, the polish and professionalism of Lieutenant Venter's unit bands became an immediate triumph for music in the U.S. fleet. So, who was your prototypical musician at the School of Music, and where did these musicians come from? Significantly, we always must remember that at this time the nation, remember the School of Music was officially founded in 1935, at that time the nation was still emerging from economic fallout after the Great Depression. Consequently, not only did a career as a musician in America's Navy afford a steady paycheck, but the newly minted School of Music offered a college-level music training program, the benefits of which were transferable to work after life in the Navy. Moreover, not only did the School of Music standardize musical professionalism within the fleet, but the School of Music resulted in a recruitment bump, since the academic results of its curriculum were transferable outside of the fleet. As Navy music historian and my supervisor, Master Chief Musician Mike Bays has argued, the musicians of Unit Band 22, much like many other Navy musicians of the time, enlisted because the Navy music program offered a lifeline for Depression era musicians. They could tap their musical talents as a means of serving their country, seeing the world, and gaining a skill set that would propel them towards success, both during and significantly after their naval service. So Unit Band 22's musician second class Emmett Isaac Lynch is one such example. When his parents and 4 siblings all tragically died of tuberculosis, Lynch was orphaned as a young child and was placed in an Ormsby Village home in Kentucky. Lynch worked as a salesperson to help pay his way through college, eventually graduating from Kentucky's Georgetown College in 1939. Shortly after his graduation, Lynch traveled to the School of Music, then right here again in Washington, D.C., to join the Navy as a musician. Once at the School of Music, Lynch passed all necessary courses, again, solfege, oral skills, music theory, applied lessons, and arranging, etc., and eventually passed his playing proficiency exams. Lynch was then placed in his Unit Band 22 and spent the remainder of his time at the School of Music honing his skills as a pianist and a drummer within the context of Unit Band 22. Under the direction of musician first class Frederick Kinney, Unit Band 22 was given orders to report to their ship, the USS Arizona, stationed in Hawaii at Pearl Harbor. On the 17th of June 1941, the musicians of the School of Music Unit Band 22 were officially transferred to the USS Arizona. Unit Band 22 quickly became the pride of the Arizona. The band's operations calendar included daily ceremonial duties, colors, the rendering of honors, and arrival ceremonies, rehearsals, drill, and concert performances both at midday and after dinner chow. As members of the Arizona's crew, each musician maintained collateral duties and a battle station assignment. Among other duties, Unit Band 22 was tasked with the loading of munitions into the elevators below the Arizona's turret 2. Remember that will become important later. Combing through primary source material in the form of band correspondence to loved ones back home, Navy Band historian Master Chief Mike Bays has argued that there existed much mutual and reciprocal pride between Unit Band 22 and the entire crew of the Arizona. Unit Band 22 loved being stationed aboard the Arizona, and the rest of the Arizona crew loved having Unit Band 22 as their band. Yet, why exactly was this the case? While Benter's unit band training program standardized professionalism among the musicians of the fleet, Unit Band 22 was evidently extraordinary. Much like Captain's Cup at Recruit Training Command, and building upon the team-oriented sense of fleet pride into which Benter's unit bands seamlessly integrated, regular Battle of the Bands events between ships' unit bands within a battle group became recreation for sailors, most especially as war posture tensions mounted in both Europe and eventually the Pacific theater during World War II. Beginning in the fall of 1941, for example, the fleet stationed at Pearl Harbor began a months-long single-elimination Battle of the Bands tournament, if you will. Not all of us are athletes, but even the bands have tournaments from time to time. Adjudicated by audience applause, ships' unit bands would compete against one another, with the top bands advancing to the semifinals and eventually to the finals, final Battle of the Bands. On the 6th of December, 1941, one such Battle of the Bands was held at Pearl Harbor's Block Auditorium, now known as Block Arena or Block Recreation Center at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. How do we know Unit Band 22 was exceptional? Well, the USS Arizona's Unit Band 22 was not scheduled to perform on December 6th, 1941, since on the 22nd of November 1941, they had already advanced to the semifinal round of this months-long Battle of the Bands. The four bands competing on the night of December 6, 1941 were the unit bands of the USS Pennsylvania, the Tennessee, the Argonne, and a local Marine unit. From correspondence and first-hand accounts, the evening was absolutely electric. The unit band from the Pennsylvania advanced to the semifinals to presumably face, among others, the Arizona's Unit Band 22. The unit band from the Pennsylvania's program that evening included Benton Overstreet's There Will Be Some Changes Made, Hoagie Carmichael's Georgia on My Mind, which was of course made famous by the late great Ray Charles, and a peppy arrangement of the holiday tune Jingle Bells as a jitterbug. After the concert, musicians from all of the unit bands were able to catch up with one another. After all, the musicians from the Tennessee, the Arizona, and the West Virginia had all been previously acquainted, having progressed through the School of Music concurrently. They knew one another. As perhaps expected, a jam session broke out. In an interview, Adone Cal Calderon, a musician from the USS West Virginia's unit band, has recalled that he was invited back to the Arizona to continue this hang, if you will. Because he was scheduled for watchstanding duties the next morning, however, Calderon dutifully declined. Although Calderon countered with the idea of possibly meeting up the next day to shop for holiday gifts to send to loved ones back home, he has said that these exchanges from late on the 6th of December 1941 were sadly the last he would have with the musicians of the USS Arizona's Unit Band 22. The morning of the 7th of December 1941 began like any other. For the musicians scheduled to perform honors, this meant donning their uniforms, grabbing their instruments, warming up, attending online, and waiting for the bandmaster's ictus, or downbeat. I don't mean to use too many musical terms. Waiting for the bandmaster's downbeat to begin the Star-Spangled Banner for morning colors. For off-duty bands, like the unit band of the West Virginia, of which Cal Calderon was a part, this meant a slow Sunday morning, grabbing breakfast, and, as Cal had suggested, possibly shopping for holiday gifts to send to loved ones back home. Because they were on duty, Unit Band 22 of the Arizona dressed off in 2 rows and ready to perform morning colors. The drum major motioned for horns up. Just before those first notes sounded, sailors began to see objects in the skies. According to survivors from other ships and the few from the Arizona, some sailors did not at first notice that these were airplanes. Others believe the bombs falling were practice bags of sand. The booming explosions, raining shrapnel, and flying debris that followed, however, indicated that this was no exercise. This was an attack. Within a few minutes, the Arizona was struck. The call rang out, battle stations, battle stations, battle stations. Based on accounts from Petty Officer First Class Don Stratton, the members of the Arizona's Unit Band 22 literally threw down their instruments and ran to battle stations. At approximately 0806, a Japanese bomb hit just aside turret 2, traveled through the deck, and ignited the very magazine the Arizona musicians were tasked with loading. Remember, their collateral duty from earlier was to load munitions through the elevator aside of turret 2. There was an immediate ignition of those munitions, which resulted in an enormous explosion. The explosion literally lifted the Arizona out of the water and immediately killed 1,177 of the 1,512 crew members on board, which sadly included the entire United States Navy Unit Band 22. In the solemn spirit of remembrance that we pause for every 7th of December, I will now read the entire roster of the members of U.S. Navy Unit Band 22, all of whom were killed in action during the attack on Pearl Harbor on the 7th of December, 1941. Musician Second Class Wayne Bandy. Musician Second Class Orrin Bravison. Musician Second Class Ralph Burdett. Musician Second Class Harry Chernuka. Musician Second Class Gerald Cox. Musician Second Class Frank Floge. Musician Second Class Curtis Haas. Musician Second Class Bernard Hughes. Musician Second Class Wendell Hurley. Musician Second Class Emmett Lynch. Musician Second Class William McCary. Musician Second Class William Morehouse. Musician Second Class Alexander Nadal. Musician Second Class Noel Bradford. Musician Second Class James Sanderson. Musician Second Class Jack Scruggs. Musician Second Class Robert Shaw. Musician Second Class Charles White. Musician Second Class Ernest Whitson. Musician Second Class Clyde Williams. And the unit leader for U.S. Navy Unit Band 22, Musician First Class Frederick Kenny. Fallen, but never, never forgotten. Today we remember the bravery, courage, and sacrifice of Unit Band 22, the rest of the Arizona's crew that were killed in action that day, and all others fallen in the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Their dedication to duty is a reflection of the highest traditions of honor, bravery, courage, and commitment of the United States Naval Service. Yet today, we can also remember the ways in which we continue the legacy of these musicians today. In America's Navy today, we deploy 11 bands around the world, around the clock. As I mentioned before, the flagship musical command of your U.S. Navy is based right here on the historic Washington Navy Yard. That is the United States Navy Band, the world's finest. In the U.S. Navy Band, we have 6 performing units. Now remember Lieutenant Benter's unit bands. Today we have the different units of the U.S. Navy Band, including our concert band, the world's finest, led by our commanding officer, Captain Ken Collins. Our fantastic ceremonial band, I mentioned Master Chief Musician Mike Bays. He is retiring next year, and he has been our head drum major for quite a while. But the ceremonial band, if you ever get a chance to see them march along Pennsylvania Avenue or many of the other fantastic ceremonies they do, they are second to none. I believe today they are presenting a wreath-laying ceremony at the U.S. Navy Memorial on Pennsylvania Avenue. In our specialty groups, we have an absolutely fantastic chorus called the Sea Chanters. I would be remiss if I didn't put in a plug for the U.S. Navy Band Commodores, our Navy's premier jazz ensemble, of which I'm very honored to be a part. The absolute best country and bluegrass group you'll ever hear, called the Country Current, and an unbelievable group, our popular music group called the Cruisers. So again, Lieutenant Benter's unit bands, today we have these very specific units of the U.S. Navy Band, and in that way this tradition carries on. At the Navy Band, our mission is to provide musical support to the President of the United States, the Department of the Navy, and other senior military and government officials through ceremonies, national and regional tours, public concerts, and recordings. The U.S. Navy Band inspires patriotism, elevates esprit de corps, enhances Navy awareness and public relations, supports recruiting and retention efforts, preserves our nation's musical heritage, and of course, we always aim to project a positive Navy image both at home and abroad. So I would be remiss if I did not mention, I mentioned the different units we have. Sometimes those units work in conjunction in sort of larger production concerts, and with the holidays upon us, I would be remiss if I did not mention our very, very wildly popular holiday concerts, which are scheduled for this Saturday, the 18th of December, and Sunday, the 19th of December. There are 2 shows on Saturday and the Sunday matinee. The concerts are being held at DAR Constitution Hall, as always. Very exciting. But again, Saturday the 18th, Sunday the 19th, the Navy Band holiday concerts. Definitely check it out, but they're very popular, so go ahead and get your tickets now if you haven't done so already. We just had a pinning ceremony for a number of new members to the band. We'll have some special guests with us there, and our fantastic new bassist making his Commodore's debut. So check all of that out. Perfect. So connect with us. Let this be the beginning of a conversation, not the end of a lecture. I like it being a discussion, not too much of a one-way thing. So connect with us, please. You can follow the Navy Band on Facebook. You can tweet us on Twitter, and you can subscribe to our fantastic YouTube page on which our public affairs staff works so diligently. And again, our website is navyband.navy.mil. If you can't remember that, just go to Google and type in Navy Band. We're the very first thing that pops up. I promise, because I check it every day to make sure that we are #1. And without further ado, Chief Perry has already introduced the fantastic registrar and collections manager for the museum, so I would like to, at this point, turn it over to Mr. Wesley Schwenk. Thank you.
Kevin, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. So, Kevin came and he donated his time so we could talk about Navy Band 22. The importance is that there are also objects out there in the world that help us commemorate Pearl Harbor and what Pearl Harbor means to Americans today. And that's kind of my focus this afternoon. And for that, I actually brought a piece that's to my left. In the video, if you're not with us, we'll show some close-ups, and then after this, I'll be able to take questions, or if anybody wants to see that object up close. That is here today because it ties into Pearl Harbor. 2 sailors, Mr. Edward Teets and Mr. Curtis Thatcher, were attached to Ford Island when the attack commenced on Pearl Harbor. So this map shows Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. You can see on the left-hand side the grayed out part right in the center. That's Ford Island Naval Air Station at that point in time, and I'll talk about some of the vessels hit there and the possibility of where this actual Bugle is from. Both men, they ended up dispersing 6 to 8 fuel trucks, observation vehicles, and segmented the lot away from the fuel tanks on the island to the outskirts of the airfield. So on the left side here, you see that where it says Ford Island Naval Air Station, that would be on the southern tip. If you're looking at something that's like Curtis, that would be where the shipwreck was. That during that time and their tenure there, they actually helped cut securing lines for USS Neosho, AO-23, an oil tanker. So Neosho is right there just south of Oklahoma. It's actually in between Oklahoma and California. Not labeled well enough there, but shows us that they took the time as they were running, both men with an axe, to cut those lines. They were rope lines, and it allowed the fleet oiler to slip back into the channel. Both men then were working their way towards the operation hangar when USS Arizona exploded on that day. A large piece of deck plate impacted the ground in front of them, and that wasn't the only thing. The second thing that landed about 20 feet from Edward Teets was that bugle. That bugle belonged to a musician attached to either USS Arizona on its time of explosion, or USS Shaw, or USS California. I say that because the provenance is quite mixed. If you find an explosion, you look at that explosion, and then an object lands 20 feet in front of you, you're not sure where that object came from. But on this map, obviously, you can see Arizona is out there to the center part of the island of where it was considered Battleship Row, but then Shaw, unfortunately, they're all the way down on the southern tip, just west of Pennsylvania, USS Pennsylvania. So, I mean, it's possible that it was Arizona, it's possible that it was Shaw. The belief that it came from Arizona was because of the explosion specifically. He didn't know that at the time, and he certainly couldn't proclaim it because both he and Thatcher were trying to get cover as well, because they had no idea what essentially was happening in front of them. So as background to the consideration for the bugle belonging to members of that band, you know, California was damaged by torpedoes and bomb hits, essentially filled with water, and sank over the course of 3 days. So where California is situated, you could see that it would have been pretty complicated to also, when they cut the ties for Neosho, to slip through all the damage, all the debris, and all the smoke that was happening around the rest of the oil tanker. You know, because California was sunk on that occasion, the possibility of it being from Arizona is also a potential, because, you know, Arizona exploded, and as we mentioned, killed most of the crew, unfortunately, that were aboard the ship at that time. Now, the Shaw figures into this because it's situated there to the south, sustained major damage from several bomb hits, and one specifically hit the forward magazine. That, upon explosion, killed 20 members of the crew immediately. So it isn't impossible that that bugle could have made its way to the edge of the airfield on Ford Island, but it could be unlikely. Teets, however, he was a Denver, Colorado enlistee, and he spent his time working on drones, even at that point in time in the 1940s, radio-controlled aircraft that were used for fleet target practice, situated at the Naval Air Station on Maui. He was attached to BJ-3, a utility squadron, and they were based off of that second largest island. After the above events, and he picked up that bugle, he managed to stay attached to Ford Island and help any crews that needed it. Thatcher was physically attached to Ford Island. That was his duty station, and he said that he lived out of his ditty bag for 2 weeks. So it means it didn't really have a location for him to be, but he didn't have all his materials with him because he was stationed on Maui, not specifically on Ford Island. By January of 1943, he was sent to Chicago, back on the mainland, to attend aircraft electrician school. So it was to use up all of his material and work with those type of skills that he had already learned in drone mechanics, and then work that up with aviation. So many members of Navy bands outside of the loss of the crew of USS Arizona ended up stationed somewhere else. Why was that? Because they were considered orphans. They had lost their ship, they had lost their duty stations essentially, and what happened to them is that they, because of something essentially catastrophic, they were then reassigned to somewhere else. So both California and specifically West Virginia, which Kevin had mentioned, those men were attached to help naval intelligence. At that point in time, naval intelligence was run by Joe Rochefort, and they used their skills at reading music to help with breaking the Japanese code. So what they essentially did with those musicians is reassign them to work on breaking the Japanese code, so we could essentially not have something like this happen again. So that included code breakers, cipher readers, and other segmented people where they would move them around to different departments within the intelligence community. Their skills at translation, that wasn't really what their specialty was. Their specialty was music, but it didn't mean that they couldn't learn very quickly, which is what they did, and they showed how apt and adept they were at learning. So that pretty much wraps it up for me today. I mean, I do have two other images. So this one here, this is to show Shaw at the time of the explosion, and then this is from the History and Heritage Command, and then this image is USS Arizona at the time of the explosion. Very similar images. Obviously shows the destruction, unfortunately, that was waged upon the United States Navy at that point in time. What you can't see here, and that's primarily why I showcased the map, but if you're looking at this image and then you look to the right, behind all of this billowing smoke screen, that's technically where West Virginia, Tennessee, and USS Vestal would have been docked alongside those other vessels in Battleship Row. And these images are the way that we look at Pearl Harbor today. If we don't look at it in objects, if we don't look at it in relics, most of these posters are what we use to essentially push ourselves into the war effort. They knew that Pearl Harbor was a big issue and a big stain on our country, but they also knew that we had to overcome that. Obviously it meant going to war, but we take the commemoration of the 80th anniversary today, not lightly. And the attack on Pearl Harbor just shows that this bugle that I had brought out here today is one representation of the sacrifice of those musician sailors lost on that day. That wraps it up for me. Kevin, if you'd like to come up and take more questions, more than welcome to. Like I said, I'll be standing by. If people have interest in seeing the bugle. If you'd also like to see what Arizona looks like, or looked like, I should say, in ship model form, there's one of those back in the World War II section on the east side of this building.
So thank you all for coming. If you are interested in any other of the museum's programs, you can always go to our website and look on the events programs tab. Does anyone have any questions for either one of our speakers? Okay, if not, feel free to come up and take a closer look at this magnificent bugle over here. I'm surprised it's still in such good condition after what it went through. Mark, did you have anything to say?
I had a question for MU1. We've talked about the band units, but clearly if this bugle came from the Shaw, that's a destroyer that would not have had a band. But my understanding is they would have had a bugler. I don't know if you know about that history, and if that's something you'd like to address about the use of music to pass orders in ships of that period, and why a destroyer might have had a bugle.
That's a great question. I don't know that I know the entire answer, but I can certainly speak to that, especially in relation to how we do things today at Navy Band. There's no regular day in the Navy, and there are many regular ceremonies, but there's not one sort of ceremonial posture that we always use. So the question refers to the idea that some ships had full bands. At this time, we're talking about Lieutenant Venter's unit bands, 21-member units. But that doesn't mean, on every Navy ship, every Navy installation, we always have the same ceremonial functions that we do every day. Colors, taps, the same ceremonial functions, and they're all accompanied by music. So whether or not it's a band performing these ceremonies for colors, or whether it's an individual bugler, we still have to observe colors in the morning and in the evening every single day. So maybe the best way to describe this is how we do things today. One of our primary missions in Navy Band is ceremonial support for Arlington National Cemetery. And we perform, while you'd think, well, these ceremonies, they should all be the same, they're actually very different. They're all sorts of different sort of processes that we go through. I mentioned that my supervisor, Master Chief Mike Bays, is our current head drum major, but we'll have a full honors funeral that progresses from one of the chapels just outside Arlington on Fort Myer, and we'll march the fallen all the way to a resting place in Arlington National Cemetery with a full band, including a drum major, and often one of our officers will come out to actually conduct those bands for the ceremonies in Arlington. There are other ceremonies where we will do a transfer, where we will sort of meet the fallen somewhere in Arlington and accompany to a different site, so it's not all the way in. That's also with a full band. Sometimes it depends on the rank of the person who is fallen. The amount of support prescribed often depends on rank. There are a lot of ceremonies that are carried out, like you said, by individual buglers. We call them bugles today. They're playing trumpets in the common era, but we still call them bugles, which is kind of cool in terms of the functional. Oh, or you're going out for a job today. Yes, I have a bugle at 1300. I have a bugle at 09. So for different types of ceremonies, we will just simply have a bugler who will meet and will perform all the necessary honors or render the honors for the ceremonies in Arlington National Cemetery. Same thing for drummers. As a drummer myself, I would be remiss if I didn't mention our sort of portion in this. Oftentimes, there are extreme weather conditions, and I will say that our ceremonial drummers are really, really steadfast and incredible with what they do throughout the winter months, and oftentimes it's too cold for woodwind players to play. Like if it's, we're talking, sometimes it can get extremely cold, and in those cases we will send out a drummer to perform all of the necessary musical accompaniment. So while the observances we're following are the same, the way that we accompany those observances can change. It's kind of varied, but that would sort of explain why one ship, a larger ship, might have a full band, and a destroyer may still need to carry a set of some musical support, but it's a smaller unit. I would say today, I mentioned the 11 Navy bands deployed around the world. Those are all very different sized. We have small musical commands, we have large musical commands, we have major commands, and we have the U.S. Navy Band where we have, I believe, 174. Those numbers change slightly every once in a while, but 174 enlisted musicians and 4 or 5 officers. That number can change too. It sort of depends on our status. I know that we relatively recently got moved to Echelon 2, so our sort of numbers have changed. But again, those numbers of the number of sailors and officers in these commands can sort of change, and they're varied based on the ceremonial support or the musical support that's needed.
Great,
Does that answer the
fantastic,
question?
thank you.
Great. Any other questions, for either for myself or Mr. Schwenk? That was really fascinating stuff. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you so much again for being here. Thank you again to Chief Perry for putting this all together. This would not have been possible without him. And again, there's a lot of exciting things going on here. So thank you to Mr. Wesley Schwenk, and check out everything going on at the National Museum of the U.S. Navy and at the Navy Band. Thank you very much.